The management and protection of commons resources, such as air, water, forests, fishery, and biodiversities, are critical for ensuring the sustainability and well-being of both human societies and the natural environment. Commons resources are shared assets that are accessible to all members of a community, but they are also susceptible to over-exploitation and degradation due to their open access nature. Effective management of these resources requires a delicate balance between individual rights and the collective good, necessitating robust policies and legal frameworks. Howdy, I'm just some random nude dude sitting in my closet talking to myself. It's also where I celebrate the power of free thinking and encourage bold ideas. As a society, we're often afraid to challenge the norms and think outside the box. But here, I embrace the unconventional. So sit back, relax, and join me on this journey of exploration, where we embrace our inner nude dude and push boundaries to discover new perspectives. Policies and legal frameworks are instrumental in regulating the use and protection of commons resources. These frameworks establish the rules, norms, and guidelines that govern how resources are accessed, utilized, and conserved. They provide mechanisms for monitoring, enforcement, and conflict resolution, ensuring that resource use is sustainable and equitable. Effective policies must consider ecological, economic, and social dimensions, promoting practices that conserve resources while also supporting the livelihoods of those who depend on them. Understanding the historical context and evolution of policies related to commons resources is essential for comprehending current management practices and challenges. Historically, commons resources were often managed through traditional or community-based systems that emphasize collective responsibility and stewardship. However, the advent of industrialization, urbanization, and global trade brought about significant changes, leading to increased pressure on these resources and the need for formal regulatory frameworks. Over time, policies have evolved to address emerging issues, such as climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution, reflecting a growing recognition of the interconnectedness of human and ecological systems. Economic considerations play a crucial role in the management of commons resources. These resources often provide essential goods and services that contribute to economic development and human well-being. However, their open access nature can lead to market failures, such as the tragedy of the commons, where individual users acting in their own self-interest deplete shared resources, resulting in collective loss. Economic policies must therefore incentivize sustainable use and ensure that the benefits derived from commons resources are distributed equitably. This includes implementing mechanisms such as payments for ecosystem services, resource pricing, and green investments. Technological innovations offer both opportunities and challenges for the management of commons resources. Advances in technology can enhance resource efficiency, improve monitoring and enforcement, and facilitate the development of sustainable practices. For example, satellite imagery and remote sensing technologies can provide critical data for tracking deforestation, illegal fishing, and pollution. Renewable energy technologies can reduce reliance on fossil fuels and mitigate climate change impacts. However, the rapid pace of technological change also presents challenges, including potential negative environmental impacts and the need for adaptive governance structures that keep pace with innovation. A significant challenge in managing commons resources is the tension between private property rights and the common good. Private property rights are often seen as essential for promoting economic efficiency and individual freedom. However, when it comes to the commons resources, prioritizing private rights can lead to over-exploitation and inequitable access. Policies and legal frameworks must navigate this tension by balancing individual rights with collective responsibilities, ensuring that resource management practices protect the common good while respecting private interests. This often involves implementing regulatory measures, creating protected areas, and promoting community-based resource management approaches. Global perspectives and cultural differences significantly influence the management of commons resources. Different societies have diverse values, traditions, and governance systems that shape how they interact with their natural environment. Indigenous and local communities often possess deep knowledge and cultural practices that promote sustainable resource use and conservation. Incorporating these perspectives into policymaking can enhance the effectiveness and legitimacy of resource management strategies. Furthermore, international cooperation and frameworks are essential for addressing transboundary issues and ensuring the global sustainability of commons resources. Effective management of commons resources requires an active engagement and involvement of all stakeholders, including governments, local communities, businesses, and civil society organizations. Participatory approaches that involve stakeholders in decision-making processes can foster ownership, accountability, and social equity. Community-based management models, where local communities are given the authority and responsibility to manage resources, have shown promising results in promoting sustainable practices and improving resource governance. Ensuring that all voices, particularly those of marginalized and vulnerable groups, are heard and considered is crucial to achieving inclusive and equitable outcomes. Despite progress in policy and legal frameworks, significant challenges remain in managing commons resources. Over-exploitation, climate change, governance weaknesses, and social inequities continue to threaten the sustainability of these resources. Addressing these challenges requires innovative and adaptive approaches that integrate ecological, economic, and social considerations. Future directions should focus on strengthening governance and institutions, promoting sustainable practices, leveraging technological innovations, enhancing climate resilience, and fostering global cooperation. By adopting a holistic and inclusive approach, policymakers and stakeholders can develop effective strategies to ensure the long-term sustainability and equitable management of commons resources. Policies and legal frameworks serve as the backbone for the stewardship of commons resources. They establish guidelines and rules that govern how these resources can be used, who can access them, and under what conditions. Effective policies are designed to prevent the tragedy of the commons, a situation where individuals, acting independently, according to their own self-interest, deplete a shared resource, resulting in long-term collective loss, like pigs grubbing for roots. For instance, fishing quotas and seasonal restrictions are examples of policies that help ensure fish populations are maintained at sustainable levels. China. Environmental regulations, such as the Clean Air Act and the Clean Water Act in the United States, set standards to protect air and water quality, ensuring that these essential resources remain viable for future generations. Moreover, international agreements, such as the Paris Agreement on climate change, illustrate how global cooperation and legal commitments can address issues that transcend national borders, highlighting the critical role of legal frameworks in managing commons resources on a global scale. Policies and legal frameworks are fundamental in the stewardship of commons resources. They serve multiple functions, from setting the usage guidelines to enforcing compliance, ensuring that these resources are managed sustainably and equitably. The complexity and diversity of commons resources require tailored approaches that take into account ecological, economic, and social dimensions. Policies and legal frameworks establish clear guidelines on how commons resources can be used. These guidelines often include limitations on extraction rates, seasonal restrictions, and specific usage zones. For example, fisheries management policies may impose catch limits and close seasons to prevent overfishing and allow fish populations to regenerate. Similarly, forestry laws may regulate logging activities to prevent deforestation and ensure sustainable timber production. Effective management of commons resources depends heavily on the enforcement of established policies. Legal frameworks provide mechanisms for monitoring and enforcing compliance, including fines, penalties, and legal action against violators. Environmental agencies and regulatory bodies play a crucial role in this enforcement. For instance, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency monitors compliance with air and water quality standards, taking action against industries that violate environmental laws. One of the primary objectives of policies and legal frameworks is to prevent the over-exploitation of commons resources. The tragedy of the commons, where individuals acting in their own greedy self-interest deplete our shared resource, underscores the need for regulatory intervention. Policies such as quotas, permits, and protected areas are designed to limit the exploitation of resources to sustainable levels. For example, the establishment of marine protected areas restricts fishing and other extractive activities, allowing marine ecosystems to thrive. Equitable access to commons resources is a critical concern, particularly for marginalized and indigenous communities who depend on these resources for their livelihoods. Policies and legal frameworks can promote equity by ensuring that these communities have secure access and rights to use the resources. For example, community-based natural resource management programs involve local communities in decision-making processes, granting them stewardship roles and access rights. Policies and legal frameworks encourage sustainable practices by incentivizing conservation and responsible resource use. Subsidies for renewable energy, tax incentives for conservation practices, and grants for sustainable agriculture are examples of how governments can promote sustainable practices. Additionally, certification schemes such as the Forest Stewardship Council certification for sustainable forestry provide market-based incentives for sustainable resource management. Many commons resources, such as oceans and the atmosphere, transcend national borders, necessitating international cooperation. Legal frameworks such as international treaties and agreements facilitate collaboration among countries to manage these resources collectively. The Paris Agreement on Climate Change is a prime example, where countries commit to reducing greenhouse gas emissions to mitigate global warming. Similarly, regional fisheries management organizations coordinate efforts to manage fish stocks that migrate across national jurisdictions. Policies and legal frameworks must be adaptive to respond to changing environmental, economic, and social conditions. Climate change, technological advancement, and population growth are dynamic factors that influence the state of commons resources. Adaptive management approaches, which involve regular monitoring, evaluation, and adjustment of policies, are essential for responding to these changes. For example, water management policies may need to adapt to altered precipitation patterns and water availability due to climate change. Effective policies and legal frameworks are informed by scientific research and indigenous knowledge. Scientific studies provide data on resource conditions, usage impacts, and ecological processes, guiding policy decisions. Indigenous knowledge, derived from generations of experience and interaction with the environment, offers valuable insights into sustainable practices in resource management. Integrating both scientific and indigenous knowledge enhances the robustness and relevance of policies. The role of policies and legal frameworks in protecting and managing commons resources is multifaceted and indispensable. By setting clear guidelines, enforcing compliance, preventing overexploitation, ensuring equitable access, promoting sustainable practices, facilitating international cooperation, adapting to changing conditions, and incorporating diverse knowledge systems, these frameworks lay the foundation for sustainable and equitable resource management. As global challenges intensify, the evolution and strengthening of these frameworks will be crucial in securing the well-being of current and future generations. Over time, the approach to managing commons resources has evolved significantly. Early efforts focused on protecting specific areas, such as the establishment of national parks in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. The environmental movement of the 1960s and 70s led to the introduction of landmark legislation like the Clean Air Act and the Endangered Species Act, which provide comprehensive protection for natural resources and wildlife. Understanding the historical context and evolution of policies and legal frameworks for managing commons resources is crucial for appreciating the progress made and the challenges that remain. This evolution reflects shifts in social values, scientific understanding, and political priorities. The concept of conserving commons resources has deep historical roots. Early efforts were often driven by the need to manage resources for subsistence. For example, many indigenous cultures practiced sustainable resource management long before formal policies existed. These practices were based on a deep understanding of local ecosystems and the necessity of maintaining resource availability for future generations. In the Western context, the modern conservation movement began in the late 19th century. The establishment of national parks, such as Yellowstone National Park in 1872, marked one of the earliest efforts to protect natural resources from exploitation. This period saw the emergence of influential conservationists like John Muir, who advocated for the preservation of wilderness areas, and Gifford Pinchot, who promoted the idea of sustainable resource use through scientific management. The early 20th century, particularly the Progressive Era in the United States, witnessed significant advancements in environmental policy. The establishment of the U.S. Forest Service in 1905, and the enactment of laws like the Antiquities Act of 1906, which allowed the President to designate national monuments, were critical milestones. These efforts reflected a growing recognition of the need to protect natural resources from over-exploitation and ensure their availability for future generations. The publication of Rachel Carson's Silent Spring in 1962 is often credited with sparking the modern environmental movement. Carson's book highlighted the dangers of pesticides and raised public awareness about environmental issues, leading to increased advocacy for stronger environmental protections. This period saw the establishment of numerous environmental regulations and institutions. The formation of the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency in 1970, and the passage of landmark legislation, such as the Clean Air Act in 1970, the Clean Water Act in 1972, and the Endangered Species Act in 1973, marked significant strides in environmental policy. These laws aim to address pollution, protect public health, and conserve biodiversity. The latter half of the 20th century saw the emergence of global environmental awareness and the recognition that many environmental issues transcend national borders. The United Nations Conference on the Human Environment, held in Stockholm in 1972, was a pivotal moment that led to the establishment of the United Nations Environmental Program. In subsequent decades, international agreements and conventions addressed various aspects of environmental protection and resource management. The 1987 Montreal Protocol successfully curbed the production of ozone-depleting substances, demonstrating the potential of international cooperation. The 1992 Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro resulted in the Rio Declaration and the establishment of frameworks for sustainable development, including the Convention on Biological Diversity and the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. In the 21st century, the focus has shifted towards integrated approaches that consider the interconnectedness of environmental, social, and economic systems. The concept of sustainable development, popularized by the Brundtland Commission's 1987 report, Our Common Future, has become a guiding principle for policymaking. This holistic approach is reflected in the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, adapted in 2015, which aim to address global challenges comprehensively. Climate change has emerged as a defining issue of our time, driving significant policy developments. The Kyoto Protocol in 1997 and the Paris Agreement in 2015 are landmark international treaties aimed at reducing greenhouse gas emissions and limiting global temperature rise. These agreements represent collective efforts to mitigate climate change and adapt to its impacts, requiring coordinated action from countries worldwide. Recent trends in policy evolution include a growing emphasis on ecosystem-based management, the recognition of the rights of indigenous peoples, and the increasing role of technology in monitoring and managing commons resources. For instance, remote sensing and geographic information systems have revolutionized the ability to track environmental change and enforce regulations. Looking ahead, future policy directions will likely focus on enhancing resilience to climate change, promoting circular economies, and integrating nature-based solutions. Strengthening international cooperation, fostering public-private partnerships, and ensuring inclusive and participatory governance will be critical in addressing the complex challenges of managing commons resources. The historical context and evolution of policies and legal frameworks for managing commons resources highlight the dynamic nature of environmental governance. From early conservation efforts to modern integrated approaches, this evolution reflects changing societal values, scientific advancements, and political priorities. Understanding this history is essential for informing current and future policies that aim to balance resource use with sustainability and equity. Economic policies play a crucial role in the management of commons resources. Market-based approaches, such as carbon trading schemes, aim to provide economic incentives for reducing emissions. Subsidies for renewable energy and penalties for pollution are examples of how economic tools can encourage sustainable practices. Economic considerations play a pivotal role in the management and protection of commons resources. These considerations encompass a range of factors, including the economic value of resources, market-based mechanisms, subsidies, the cost of environmental degradation, and the economic impacts of regulation. By understanding and addressing these economic aspects, policymakers can design effective strategies that promote sustainable resource use while ensuring economic viability. Commons resources often hold significant economic value, both in terms of direct usage, such as fisheries and timber, and indirect benefit, such as ecosystem services. Ecosystem services include critical functions like water purification, carbon sequestration, soil fertility, and biodiversity, which are essential for human well-being and economic stability. Quantifying these values can help in making informed policy decisions and in highlighting the importance of conserving these resources. For example, the economic valuation of wetlands, which provide flood control, water filtration, and habitat for wildlife, can justify their protection and restoration. Similarly, forests, which offer timber, non-timber products, and recreational opportunities, also play a crucial role in carbon sequestration and climate regulation. Market-based mechanisms are economic tools used to promote sustainable resource management by aligning economic incentives with conservation goals. Cap-and-trade systems set a limit, or cap, on the total level of certain pollutants or resource use, and allow entities to buy and sell permits to emit pollutants or use resources. For instance, the European Union emissions trading system is a cap-and-trade system for carbon emissions, encouraging industries to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions cost-effectively. Payment for ecosystem services schemes provide financial incentives to landowners or resource users for maintaining or enhancing ecosystem services. An example is Costa Rica's PEZ program, which pays landowners for activities that preserve forest cover, thereby promoting biodiversity conservation and watershed protection. Certification programs, such as the Forest Stewardship Council for Sustainable Forestry, or the Marine Stewardship Council for Sustainable Fisheries, creates market incentives for sustainable practices by offering certification labels that attract environmentally conscious consumers, which we all should be. Governments often use subsidies and incentives to encourage sustainable practices and reduce the economic burden of transitioning to greener alternatives. Financial incentives for renewed energy development, such as tax credits, grants, and feed-in tariffs, help promote the adoption of clean energy technologies and reduce dependence on fossil fuels. For example, Germany's Energiewende policy includes substantial subsidies for renewable energy, leading to significant increases in solar and wind power generation. Subsidies can support sustainable agricultural practices that enhance soil health, reduce water use, and minimize chemical inputs. Programs like the European Union's Common Agricultural Policy include incentives for farmers who adopt environmentally friendly practices. Financial incentives for landowners to preserve natural areas through conservation easements, which restrict land use to conservation purposes, help protect biodiversity and ecosystem services. The economic costs of environmental degradation are significant and can undermine long-term economic stability. Degradation of commons resources lead to loss of ecosystem services, increased health costs, reduced agricultural productivity, and heightened vulnerability to natural disasters. Recognizing these costs is crucial for justifying investments in conservation and sustainable management. For example, the economic impact of deforestation includes loss of timber resources, decreased water quality, soil erosion, and reduced carbon sequestration capacity. These impacts translate into financial losses for industries, higher costs for water treatment, and increased vulnerability to climate change. Environmental regulations can have varied economic impacts. While some argue that regulations impose costs on businesses, others emphasize the long-term economic benefit for sustainable practices and pollution control. Businesses may face initial costs to comply with environmental regulations, such as investing in cleaner technologies or changing production processes. However, these costs can be offset by long-term savings from increased efficiency and reduced waste. Environmental regulations can create economic opportunities by fostering innovation and the development of green technologies and industries. The growth of the renewable energy sector, driven by supportive policies and regulations, has generated jobs and economic activity worldwide. Reducing pollution through environmental regulations can lead to significant public health benefits, decreasing healthcare costs, and improving workforce productivity. For instance, regulations that reduce air pollution have been shown to lower rates of respiratory and cardiovascular diseases. Balancing economic and environmental goals is a complex but essential task. Policymakers must design strategies that promote economic growth while ensuring the sustainable use of commons resources. This balanced use can be achieved through integrated approaches that consider economic, social, and environmental dimensions of resource management. Economic considerations are integral to the effective management and protection of commons resources. By recognizing the economic value of these resources, utilizing market-based mechanisms, providing subsidies and incentives, accounting for the costs of environmental degradation, and evaluating the economic impacts of regulation, policymakers can develop strategies that promote sustainable resource use while supporting economic prosperity. As the global economy continues to evolve, innovative economic approaches will be crucial in addressing the challenges of managing commons resources sustainably. Technological advancements are instrumental in enhancing the management of commons resources. Satellite technology allows for real-time monitoring of deforestation and illegal fishing activities. Innovations in water purification and renewable energy technologies contribute to the sustainable use and protection of natural resources. Technological innovations are playing an increasingly critical role in the protection and management of commons resources. Advances in technology offer new tools and methods for monitoring, managing, and conserving these resources more effectively. From remote sensing and data analytics to renewable energy technologies, these innovations provide a means to address environmental challenges with greater precision and efficiency. Remote sensing technologies, including satellites, drones, and aircraft, provide invaluable data for monitoring commons resources. These technologies can capture high-resolution images and data across large areas, allowing for real-time monitoring and assessment of environmental conditions. Satellite imagery can track changes in forest cover, identifying areas of deforestation and degradation. Programs like the Global Forest Watch use satellite data to monitor forests worldwide, enabling governments and organizations to detect illegal logging activities and take timely action. Remote sensing can monitor water bodies for changes in quality and quantity. For example, satellites equipped with sensors can measure algae blooms, sediment levels, and water temperature, providing critical information for managing freshwater resources. Geographic information systems and remote sensing technologies are used to monitor crop health, soil moisture levels, and land use changes. This information helps farmers optimize irrigation, apply fertilizers efficiently, and adopt sustainable agriculture practices. The explosion of big data and advancements in AI have revolutionized the management of commons resources. These technologies enable the analysis of vast amounts of data to identify patterns, predict trends, and inform decision-making. AI algorithms can analyze historical data to predict future trends in resource availability and usage. For instance, predictive models can forecast fish stock levels, helping to set up sustainable fishing quotas. IoT devices and sensors collect real-time data on environmental conditions, such as air and water quality, temperature, and humidity. AI systems can process this data to detect anomalies and trigger alerts for immediate action. AI can optimize the use of resources by analyzing consumption patterns and suggesting efficiency measures. For example, AI-driven irrigation systems can adjust water application based on real-time soil moisture data, reducing water waste. Renewable energy technologies, such as solar, wind, and hydroelectric power, play a crucial role in reducing dependency on fossil fuels and mitigating climate change. These technologies contribute to the sustainable management of commons resources by providing clean and renewable energy sources. Advances in photovoltaic technology have made solar power more efficient and cost-effective. Solar panels can be deployed on rooftops, in solar farms, and even integrated into building materials, providing decentralized and sustainable energy solutions. Innovations in wind turbine design and materials have increased the efficiency and capacity of wind power. Offshore wind farms, in particular, have significant potential to generate large amounts of renewable energy with minimal environmental impact. Advances in battery technology and energy storage systems are critical for the integration of renewable energy into the grid. Efficient energy storage solutions enable the reliable supply of electricity from intermittent renewable sources, such as solar and wind. Smart grid technologies enhance the efficiency and reliability of electricity distribution. These systems use digital communication and automation to manage electricity flows, integrate renewable energy sources, and optimize energy use. Smart grids enable demand response programs where consumers adjust their energy usage in response to real-time price signals or grid needs. This helps balance supply and demand, reducing the need for fossil fuel-based power plants. Smart grids facilitate the integration of distributed renewable energy sources, such as rooftop solar panels, into the grid. They can manage the variable output of these sources and ensure a stable electricity supply. Biotechnology offers innovative solutions for sustainable agriculture, reducing the environmental impact of farming and enhancing food security. Biotechnology has developed genetically modified crops that are resistant to pests, diseases, and environmental stresses. These crops can reduce the need for chemical pesticides and fertilizers, promoting sustainable farming practices. Technologies such as GPS, sensors, and data analytics enable precision agriculture, where inputs like water, fertilizers, and pesticides are applied precisely where needed. This minimizes waste and environmental impact while maximizing crop yields. Advances in soil science and biotechnology allow for the monitoring and improvement of soil health. Techniques such as soil microbiome analysis and biofertilizers enhance soil fertility and promote sustainable land management. Technological innovations are also transforming waste management and promoting the circular economy, where resources are reused, recycled, and recovered. Advanced recycling technologies can process a wider range of materials, increasing recycling rates and reducing landfill waste. Innovations in chemical recycling can break down plastics into their original components, enabling the production of new plastics without relying on fossil fuels. Waste-to-energy technologies convert waste materials into energy, reducing the volume of waste and providing a renewable energy source. For example, anaerobic digestion produces biogas from organic waste, which can be used for electricity generation or as a vehicle fuel. Advances in product design and manufacturing are promoting the development of products that are easier to repair, recycle, and repurpose. This supports the transition into a circular economy, where products and materials are kept in use for as long as possible. Technological innovations are essential for the effective management and protection of commons resources. By leveraging advances in remote sensing, big data, AI, renewable energy, smart grids, biotechnology, and waste management, we can address environmental challenges with greater precision and efficiency. These technologies not only enhance our ability to monitor and manage resources, but also promote sustainable practices and reduce environmental impact. As technology continues to evolve, its integration into policy and management strategies will be crucial for the sustainable stewardship of commons resources. One of the most significant challenges in managing commons resources is the tension between private property rights and the common good. Private property rights are fundamental in many legal systems, providing individuals and corporations with the autonomy to use and manage their property as they see fit. These rights incentivize economic growth and personal responsibility. However, when it comes to commons resources, unfettered private property rights can lead to conflicts and negative externalities. For example, a factory owner may have the right to use water from a nearby river for production, but if this leads to pollution that affects downstream communities, the common good is compromised. Balancing these interests requires careful consideration and often regulatory intervention. Zoning laws, environmental impact assessments, and public trust doctrines are legal tools used to mediate these conflicts. These tools ensure that private property use does not harm the public interest and that the benefits of commons resources are equitably distributed. The tension between private property rights and the common good is a long-standing and complex issue in the management of commons resources. This tension arises from the conflicting interests of individual property owners and the broader community. Balancing these interests is crucial for ensuring sustainable and equitable resource management. Private property rights grant individuals or entities the legal authority to use, control, and transfer resources. These rights are fundamental to market economies, providing incentives for investment, innovation, and efficient resource use. However, when it comes to commons resources, private property rights can lead to challenges such as over-exploitation and environmental degradation if not properly regulated. Private property rights can promote economic efficiency by aligning resource use with market demand. Property owners have a financial incentive to maximize the value of their resources, leading to investments in improvements and innovation. For instance, farmers with secure land tenure are more likely to invest in soil conservation practices and sustainable agriculture technologies. Private property rights can also result in exclusion and inequality, particularly when access to essential resources is restricted. For example, privatizing water resources can limit access to marginalized communities, leading to social and economic disparities. This exclusion undermines the common good and can provoke social conflicts. The common good refers to the well-being of the broader community and the sustainability of shared resources. It emphasizes collective benefit and equitable access to resources, ensuring that current and future generations can meet their needs. Policies and legal frameworks often aim to balance private property rights with the common good through regulations, taxes, and public ownership of certain resources. The common good often prioritizes public health and safety over individual property rights. For example, environmental regulations that limit industrial pollution protect air and water quality, benefiting the entire community. These regulations may impose costs on property owners, but are justified by the broader public health benefits. Ensuring the sustainability of commons resources is a key aspect of the common good. Overexploitation of resources by individual property owners can lead to resource depletion and environmental degradation, compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs. Sustainable management practices, supported by regulatory frameworks, are essential for maintaining the health of commons resources. Balancing private property rights with the common good involves navigating complex trade-offs and conflicts. Effective policies and legal frameworks must address these tensions by integrating economic, social, and environmental considerations. Governments can regulate the use of private property to protect commons resources. Zoning laws, environmental impact assessments, and restrictions on certain activities, such as mining or logging, are examples of regulatory approaches. These regulations aim to mitigate the negative impacts of private property use on the environment and the community. Incentives can encourage property owners to adopt sustainable practices that align with the common good. Subsidies, tax credits, and grants for conservation efforts, renewable energy installations, and sustainable agriculture can motivate property owners to manage their resources responsibly. Involving communities and stakeholders in decision-making processes can help balance private and collective interests. Participatory approaches ensure that the voices of affected communities are heard, fostering more equitable and inclusive resource management. Community-based natural resource management programs, for example, involve local communities in managing forests, fisheries, and other commons resources. Several real-world examples illustrate the tension between private property rights and the common good, highlighting the challenges and potential solutions. In regions facing water scarcity, such as the western United States, conflicts often arise between private water rights and the need to ensure equitable access to water for all users. Policies like water markets and trading can help allocate water more efficiently while protecting the interests of both property owners and the community. Rapid urban development can lead to the loss of green spaces, which are important for public health, recreation, and biodiversity. Balancing private property development with the preservation of public parks and natural areas requires careful planning and regulatory measures, such as setting aside land for public use or creating incentives for developers to include green spaces in their projects. Overfishing in common fisheries can result from the absence of clearly defined property rights. Implementing catch shares or individual transferable quotas can align individual fishing practices with sustainable management goals, reducing overfishing and ensuring the long-term viability of fish stocks. Effective legal and policy frameworks are essential for managing the tension between private property rights and the common good. These frameworks can take various forms. The public trust doctrine is a legal principle that holds certain natural resources, such as air, water, and wildlife, in trust for public use. Governments are responsible for protecting these resources for the benefit of the public, even if it means restricting private property rights. Governments can use eminent domain to acquire private property for public purposes, such as building infrastructure or preserving natural areas. Compensation to property owners is typically required, balancing the need for public benefit with the rights of individuals. Collective governance models bring together government agencies, private property owners, and other stakeholders to jointly manage common resources. These models emphasize cooperation, negotiation, and shared decision-making to address conflicts and achieve sustainable outcomes. The tension between private property rights and the common good is a central challenge to the management of commons resources. By understanding the complexities of this relationship and implementing balanced policies and legal frameworks, it's possible to protect and manage these resources sustainably and equitably. Effective strategies include regulatory approaches, incentives for sustainable practices, public participation, and collaborative governance. As global pressures on commons resources continues to grow, addressing this tension will be increasingly important for ensuring the well-being of both individuals and communities. Different countries and cultures have varying approaches to managing commons resources. Indigenous knowledge and practices often offer sustainable and holistic methods for resource management. For instance, the traditional land management practices of indigenous peoples in Australia have been recognized for their effectiveness in preventing wildfires and maintaining biodiversity. The management and protection of commons resources are deeply influenced by global perspectives and cultural differences. Diverse cultural values, traditions, and socioeconomic conditions shape how communities perceive and interact with their environment. Recognizing and respecting these differences is essential for creating inclusive and effective policies that ensure sustainable and equitable resource management. Indigenous communities around the world have developed intricate knowledge systems and sustainable practices for managing commons resources over centuries. These practices are often deeply embedded in cultural traditions and spiritual beliefs, emphasizing a harmonious relationship with nature. Many indigenous cultures view the natural world as a web of interconnected relationships rather than a collection of separate resources. For instance, the Maori of New Zealand regard rivers and forests as ancestors, and their management practices reflect a deep respect for these entities. Traditional ecological knowledge encompasses the accumulated knowledge, practices, and beliefs of indigenous peoples regarding the environment. Examples include rotational farming, agroforestry, and the use of fire for land management, which enhance biodiversity and resilience. Indigenous tribes in the Amazon have practiced sustainable resource management for generations. Their knowledge of plant species, animal behavior, and forest dynamics is invaluable for conservation efforts. Initiatives that involve indigenous communities in rainforest protection, such as Brazil's Indigenous Lands Program, demonstrate the effectiveness of integrating traditional ecological knowledge into modern conservation strategies. In contrast, Western and industrialized societies often emphasize economic growth, technological advancement, and individual property rights. These perspectives have led to significant achievements in economic development and innovation, but also to environmental degradation and resource depletion. Western approaches often rely on market mechanisms and regulatory frameworks to manage commons resources. Concepts such as carbon trading, ecosystem services valuation, and resource privatization reflect this perspective. While these approaches can drive efficiency and innovation, they may overlook social equity and ecological sustainability. Industrialized nations frequently advocate for technological solutions to environmental problems. Renewable energy technologies, waste management innovations, and precision agriculture are examples of how technology is leveraged to address resource management challenges. However, the implementation of these technologies must consider local context and cultural acceptability. The European Union's Common Fisheries Policy combines market-based approaches with regulatory measures to manage fish stocks sustainably. By setting catch limits and promoting eco-labeling, the CFP aims to balance economic interests with environmental sustainability. Developing countries and emerging economies face unique challenges in managing commons resources, often balancing economic development with environmental conservation. These regions may have diverse cultural practices and socioeconomic conditions that influence resource management strategies. Rapid industrialization and urbanization can strain commons resources in developing countries. For example, deforestation for agriculture and infrastructure development can lead to biodiversity loss and climate change impacts. Policies must address the need for economic growth while protecting the environment. Many developing countries emphasize community-based natural resource management to empower local communities and promote sustainable practices. CBNRM approaches recognize the importance of local management and participation in managing resources such as forests, water, and fisheries. Nepal's community forestry program involves local communities in the management of forest resources. By granting forest user groups legal rights and responsibilities, the program has successfully improved forest conditions, increased biodiversity, and enhanced local livelihoods. Addressing global environmental challenges requires international cooperation and the recognition of cultural differences. International agreements and frameworks provide platforms for countries to collaborate on the management of commons resources. The United Nations plays a pivotal role in facilitating global cooperation on environmental issues. Frameworks such as the Convention on Biological Diversity, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, and the Sustainable Development Goals emphasize the importance of integrating cultural perspectives into global strategies. Climate change mitigation efforts, such as the Paris Agreement, highlight the need for culturally sensitive approaches. Developing countries often require financial and technical support to implement mitigation and adaptation measures, recognizing the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities. The Reducing Emissions from Deforestation and Forest Degradation, or REDD+ program, exemplifies global cooperation that incorporates cultural differences. REDD+ provides financial incentives to developing countries to reduce deforestation and promote sustainable land management. The program emphasizes the involvement of indigenous and local communities in its implementation. Cultural differences significantly impact how policies and regulations are perceived and implemented. Effective policy management requires an understanding of local contexts and the integration of cultural values in the resource management strategies. Inclusive and participatory approaches to policy development and implementation ensure that diverse cultural perspectives are considered. Engaging local communities, stakeholders, and indigenous peoples in decision-making processes enhance policy effectiveness and social adaptability. Policies must be culturally sensitive and adaptable to local contexts. For example, conservation initiatives that impose strict restrictions without considering the local livelihoods and cultural practices can face resistance and fail to achieve their objectives. Wildlife conservation efforts in Africa, such as those in Tanzania and Kenya, have evolved to include community-based approaches. Programs that involve local communities in ecotourism and wildlife management have shown greater success in reducing poaching and promoting conservation. Global perspectives and cultural differences profoundly influence the management and protection of commons resources. Recognizing and respecting these differences is essential for developing inclusive and effective policies that promote sustainable and equitable resource management. By integrating indigenous knowledge, balancing economic development with environmental conservation, and fostering international cooperation, we can address global environmental challenges while honoring cultural diversity. As the world becomes more interconnected, culturally sensitive approaches will be increasingly important for achieving sustainable and just outcomes. Engaging stakeholders, including local communities, governments, NGOs, and private entities, is vital for effective resource management. Participatory approaches, where communities have a say in decision-making processes, can lead to more sustainable and accepted outcomes. Community forestry programs and collective water management initiatives are examples of successful stakeholder engagement. Stakeholder engagement and community involvement are critical components of effective commons resource management. By involving a diverse range of stakeholders and ensuring active community participation, policies and practices can be better aligned with local needs and conditions, leading to more sustainable and equitable outcomes. Stakeholders are individuals or groups with an interest or stake in a particular resource or issue. Engaging stakeholders ensures that diverse perspectives and interests are considered in decision-making processes. This can enhance the legitimacy, transparency, and effectiveness of resource management strategies. Different stakeholders bring varied knowledge, experience, and priorities. Including diverse perspectives helps to identify potential conflicts and synergies, fostering comprehensive and balanced solutions. For instance, farmers, indigenous communities, industry representatives, and environmental NGOs each have unique insights into land and resource use. Effective stakeholder engagement promotes social equity by giving marginalized and vulnerable groups a voice in decision-making. This ensures that the benefits and burdens of resource management are distributed more fairly and the rights and needs of all stakeholders are respected. Transparent and inclusive engagement processes build trust among stakeholders and increase the legitimacy of decisions. When stakeholders feel their voices are heard and the concerns addressed, they are more likely to support and comply with management practices. Several mechanisms can facilitate stakeholder engagement in commons resource management. These mechanisms range from formal institutions and processes to informal consultations and partnerships. Multi-stakeholder platforms bring together representatives from various sectors to discuss and negotiate resource management issues. These platforms can include government agencies, NGOs, private sector actors, and community groups. An example is the Roundtable on Sustainable Palm Oil, which involves diverse stakeholders in setting standards for sustainable palm oil production. Public consultations involve gathering input from a broad range of stakeholders through meetings, surveys, and workshops. This process helps to identify stakeholder concerns, preferences, and suggestions, informing policy development and implementation. For example, the environmental impact assessments often include public consultations to gather feedback on proposed projects. Participatory planning involves stakeholders directly in the planning and decision-making process. Techniques such as participatory rural appraisal and community mapping engage local communities in identifying issues, setting priorities, and developing action plans. This approach ensures that management strategies reflect local knowledge and conditions. Community involvement is a specific form of stakeholder engagement that focuses on empowering local communities to actively participate in managing commons resources. This involvement is essential for achieving sustainable and locally appropriate outcomes. Community-based natural resource management approaches empower local communities to manage natural resources such as forests, fisheries, and water sources. By granting communities legal rights and responsibilities, CB&RM fosters local stewardship and sustainable practices. An example is Namibia's communal conservancies, where local communities manage wildlife and benefit from tourism revenues. Involving communities in monitoring and evaluating resource conditions and management outcomes enhances accountability and adaptive management. Community members can collect data on resource use, biodiversity, and environmental changes, providing valuable information for decision-making. For instance, community-based forest monitoring in the Congo Basin helps track deforestation and forest degradation. Ensuring that communities benefit from resource management initiatives is crucial for their involvement and support. Benefit sharing mechanisms can include revenue sharing from tourism, payments for ecosystem services, and access to alternative livelihoods. For example, the Yasuni ITT initiative in Ecuador proposed compensating the country for leaving oil reserves untapped in a biodiverse area, with funds benefiting local communities. Engaging stakeholders and involving communities in resource management present both challenges and opportunities. Addressing these challenges and leveraging opportunities is key to successful engagement. Power imbalances among stakeholders can hinder effective management. Dominant groups may overshadow marginalized voices, leading to inequitable outcomes. Ensuring equitable representation and addressing power dynamics are essential. Limited capacity and resources among communities and stakeholders can impede participation. Providing training, resources, and support is necessary to enable meaningful involvement. Conflicts among stakeholders can arise due to differing interests and priorities. Effective conflict resolution and negotiation mechanisms are needed to foster cooperation and consensus. Stakeholder engagement can build social capital, strengthening relationships and networks among stakeholders. This enhances collaboration and resilience in resource management. Integrating local and indigenous knowledge with scientific data improves the relevance and effectiveness of management strategies. This holistic approach leverages the strength of both knowledge systems. Empowering communities and stakeholders fosters a sense of ownership and responsibility for resource management. This can lead to more sustainable practices and a long-term commitment. Several case studies highlight successful stakeholder engagement and community involvement in commons resource management. The establishment of the marine protected areas in the Philippines involved local fishing communities in planning and management. Community members participated in setting boundaries, developing regulations, and monitoring compliance. This collaborative approach led to improved fish stocks and biodiversity, benefiting both environment and local livelihoods. Integrated water resource management in South Africa emphasizes stakeholder participation in managing water resources. Catchment management agencies involve diverse stakeholders, including local communities, industries, and farmers, in water allocation and conservation efforts. This participatory approach has enhanced water governance and promoted equitable access to water. India's Joint Forest Management Program involves local communities in managing forest resources. Community forest management committees work with government agencies to protect forests, restore degraded lands, and share benefits from forest products. JFM has led to increased forest cover, improved biodiversity, and enhanced livelihoods for forest-dependent communities. Stakeholder engagement and community involvement are essential for the sustainable and equitable management of commons resources. By incorporating diverse perspectives, addressing power imbalances, and empowering local communities, policies and practices can better reflect local needs and conditions. Effective engagement fosters legitimacy, trust, and social equity, leading to more resilient and sustainable resource management outcomes. As environmental challenges become increasingly complex, inclusive and participatory approaches will be crucial for achieving long-term success in managing commons resources. Current challenges in managing commons resources include climate change, population growth, and political instability. Future policies and legal frameworks must be adaptive and innovative to address these issues. Strengthening international cooperation, enhancing technological integration, and fostering inclusive governance models are potential pathways to ensuring the sustainable management of commons resources. Managing commons resources involves numerous challenges which necessitate innovative and adaptive strategies to ensure sustainable and equitable outcomes. Understanding these challenges and exploring future directions can guide policymakers, communities, and stakeholders towards more effective resource management. The concept of the tragedy of the commons describes how individuals, acting in their self-interest, can overexploit shared resources, leading to depletion and degradation. Fisheries, forests, and grazing lands often face this challenge, resulting in biodiversity loss and reduced ecosystem services. Pollution from industrial activities, agriculture, and urbanization can degrade commons resources such as air, water, and soil. Contaminants can accumulate in ecosystems, affecting human health and biodiversity. Climate change alters ecosystems and affects the availability and distribution of commons resources. Rising temperatures, changing precipitation patterns, and extreme weather events can disrupt ecosystems and human communities. Developing strategies to adapt to and mitigate climate change impacts is crucial. This includes building resilience in ecosystems and communities, enhancing adaptive capacity, and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Effective resource management requires strong and transparent institutions. Weak government structures, corruption, and lack of enforcement can hinder the implementation of policies and regulations. Managing commons resources often involves multiple jurisdictions and stakeholders. Ensuring coordination and cooperation among different levels of government, sectors, and communities is essential but challenging. Unequal access to commons resources can exacerbate social and economic disparities. Marginalized communities often bear the brunt of resource depletion and environmental degradation, while wealthier groups may benefit disproportionately. Many communities depend on commons resources for their livelihood. Over-exploitation and degradation can undermine these livelihoods, leading to economic hardship and social conflict. Advances in technology can both help and hinder resource management. While new technologies can improve efficiency and sustainability, they can also lead to unforeseen environmental and social impacts. Incomplete scientific knowledge and uncertainty about ecological processes and thresholds complicate decision-making. Adaptive management approaches are needed to navigate these uncertainties. Strengthening the capacity of local, regional, and national institutions is crucial for effective resource management. This includes training, resources, and support for enforcement and monitoring. Promoting inclusive and participatory government models ensures that diverse voices are heard and considered in decision-making processes. This enhances legitimacy and accountability. Adopting integrated approaches that consider the interconnectedness between different resources and ecosystems can enhance sustainability. Examples include integrated water resource management and landscape-level conservation. Supporting sustainable livelihoods that rely on commons resources can reduce pressures on these resources. This includes promoting agroecology, sustainable fisheries, and community-based tourism. Transitioning to renewable energy sources and improving energy efficiency can reduce environmental impacts and enhance sustainability. Technologies such as solar, wind, and bioenergy can provide clean energy while reducing reliance on fossil fuels. Technological innovations in agriculture, such as precision farming and smart irrigation, can increase productivity while reducing resource use and environmental impacts. Implementing ecosystem-based adaptation strategies leverages the natural resilience of ecosystems to buffer against climate impacts. This includes restoring wetlands, protecting mangroves, and promoting agroforestry. Engaging local communities in adaptation planning and implementation ensures that strategies are context-specific and locally appropriate. Building local capacity and knowledge is essential for effective adaptation. Strengthening international agreements and frameworks is crucial for addressing global environmental challenges. Agreements such as the Paris Agreement on Climate Change and the Convention on Biological Diversity provide important platforms for cooperation. Many commons resources, such as rivers, oceans, and migratory species, cross national boundaries. Collaborative management approaches that involve multiple countries and stakeholders are essential for sustainable management. Ensuring equitable access to commons resources is fundamental for social justice and sustainability. Policies should prioritize the needs and rights of marginalized communities and address power imbalances. Implementing benefit-sharing mechanisms ensures that the benefits of resource management are distributed fairly. This can include revenue sharing from natural resource extraction, payments for ecosystem services, and community development projects. The Coral Triangle Initiative on coral reefs, fisheries, and food security is a multilateral partnership among 6 countries in Southeast Asia and the Pacific. The CTI aims to safeguard the region's marine and coastal resources through cooperative action and sustainable management practices. By integrating scientific research, community involvement, and policy development, the initiative addresses challenges such as overfishing, climate change, and habitat destruction. The Great Green Wall Initiative in Africa aims to combat desertification and land degradation by creating a mosaic of green and productive landscapes across the Sahel region. This ambitious project involves local communities in planting trees, restoring degraded lands, and promoting sustainable agriculture. The initiative addresses multiple challenges including climate change, food security, and rural poverty, while enhancing ecosystem resilience. Namibia's community-based wildlife conservation programs empower local communities to manage and benefit from wildlife resources. Through communal conservancies, communities receive rights to use and manage wildlife, with revenues generated from tourism and sustainable hunting. This approach has led to significant conservation successes, including the recovery of endangered species and improved livelihoods of rural communities. The management of commons resources faces numerous challenges, including over-exploitation, climate change, governance weaknesses, social inequities, and technological uncertainties. Addressing these challenges requires a multifaceted approach that includes strengthening governance, promoting sustainable practices, leveraging technology, enhancing climate resilience, fostering global cooperation, and ensuring social equity. By embracing these future directions, policymakers, communities, and stakeholders can work together to achieve sustainable, equitable outcomes for the commons resources on which we all depend. As global pressures on these resources continue to grow, innovative and adaptive strategies will be crucial for ensuring their long-term sustainability and the well-being of both current and future generations. The protection and management of commons resources hinge on the effectiveness of policies and legal frameworks. These frameworks must strike a delicate balance between upholding private property rights and safeguarding the common good. As global challenges like climate change and biodiversity loss intensify, the need for cohesive and adaptive legal structures becomes even more pressing. By fostering cooperation, ensuring equitable access, and preventing over-exploitation, policies and legal frameworks can help secure the sustainability of commons resources for future generations. Effective management of commons resources is pivotal for ensuring ecological sustainability, economic stability, and social equity. These shared resources, which include air, water, forests, fisheries, and biodiversity, are essential for the well-being of human societies and the health of our planet. However, managing these resources poses significant challenges, ranging from over-exploitation and environmental degradation to governance weaknesses and social inequities. Addressing these challenges requires a comprehensive and integrated approach, drawing on the strengths and knowledge of diverse stakeholders and communities. Policies and legal frameworks play a crucial role in protecting and managing commons resources. Strong, transparent, and enforceable policies can provide the necessary structure for sustainable resource management. These frameworks must balance the interests of diverse stakeholders, including governments, private sector actors, and local communities. Effective policies should promote sustainable practices, ensure equitable access, and protect the rights of marginalized groups. Local mechanisms such as property rights, environmental regulations, and international agreements are essential tools in this endeavor. Global perspectives and cultural differences significantly influence how commons resources are managed. Indigenous knowledge and practices offer valuable insights into sustainable resource use, emphasizing the importance of community involvement and holistic worldviews. Western and industrialized perspectives often focus on technological and market-based solutions, which can drive innovation but must be adapted to local contexts. Developing countries and emerging economies face unique challenges, balancing economic development with environmental conservation. Recognizing and respecting these cultural differences is key to developing inclusive and effective resource management strategies. Stakeholder engagement and community involvement are essential for the successful management of commons resources. Inclusive and participatory approaches ensure the diverse perspectives are considered, promoting social equity and building trust among stakeholders. Mechanisms such as multi-stakeholder platforms, public consultations, and community-based natural resource management empower local communities to foster collaboration. Ensuring that communities benefit from resource management initiatives through benefit-sharing mechanisms and sustainable livelihoods is crucial for gaining the support and commitment. Economic considerations and technological innovations play a critical role in resource management. Sustainable economic development requires balancing resource use with environmental protection. Market-based approaches, such as ecosystem services valuation and green investments, can incentivize sustainable practices. Technological advancements, from renewable energy to precision farming, offer opportunities to enhance resource efficiency and reduce environmental impact. However, these innovations must be implemented carefully to avoid unintended consequences and ensure that they benefit all stakeholders equitably. Climate change poses a significant threat to commons resources, affecting ecosystems and human communities. Enhancing climate resilience requires integrating ecosystem-based and community-based adaptation strategies. International cooperation is crucial for addressing global environmental challenges. Strengthening international agreements, such as the Paris Agreement and the Convention on Biological Diversity, provides a framework for collaborative action. Transboundary resource management approaches are essential for managing resources that cross national boundaries, such as rivers and migratory species. Promoting sustainable practices and inclusive governance is key to the long-term management of commons resources. Integrated resource management approaches consider the interconnections between different resources and ecosystems. Sustainable livelihoods supported by policies and benefit-sharing mechanisms reduce pressure on commons resources. Strengthening governance and institutional capacity, promoting participatory governance, and ensuring equitable access are fundamental for achieving social justice and sustainability. Addressing power imbalances, providing capacity-building support, and fostering cooperation among stakeholders are critical steps in this direction. The complexity and uncertainty inherent in managing commons resources require adaptive management approaches. These approaches involve continuous learning, monitoring, and adjusting strategies based on new information and changing conditions. Embracing innovation, both in technology and governance, can enhance the effectiveness and resilience of resource management practices. Integrating local and indigenous knowledge with scientific data improves decision-making and ensures that management strategies are locally appropriate and culturally sensitive. The future of commons resource management hinges on our ability to address current challenges and embrace new opportunities. By integrating robust policies, leveraging global perspectives, engaging stakeholders, and fostering sustainable practices, we can develop strategies that ensure the long-term sustainability and equity of these vital resources. As global pressures on commons resources continue to grow, innovative and adaptive approaches will be essential for navigating the complexities of resource management. Through collaboration, inclusivity, and a commitment to sustainability, we can safeguard commons resources for future generations and ensure the well-being of all communities. The management of commons resources is a shared responsibility that requires collective action and a holistic approach. By addressing these challenges and leveraging the opportunities presented, we can create a sustainable future where commons resources are protected and managed for the benefit of all. The journey ahead demands dedication, innovation, and a deep respect for the interconnectedness of human societies and the natural world. Together, we can build resilient and equitable systems that support both people and the planet. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you found this video informative and thought-provoking. This is the point where others tell you, if you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing for more content just like this. But we know that kind of thing is for losers. Don't be a loser. And as always, I welcome your feedback and ideas for future videos in the comments section below. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep embracing your inner nude, dude.